Hello, and welcome to the Thinking Elixir podcast, where we cover the news of the community and learn from each other. My name is Mark Erickson.
And I'm David Bernheisel.
Let's jump into the news. First up, a new case study appeared on the Elixir Lang blog. So it's actually been a little while since we've seen any case studies, new ones showing up. So this was cool. I just loved seeing it. And so this one is focused on the company named Remote. So if you're not familiar with Remote, it is a company that, like they describe it as, Remote is the everywhere employment platform enabling companies to find, hire, manage, and pay people anywhere across the world. Like when I was at Fly, we used a company called Deal for that same kind of thing, because you have to have presence inside a country that's under that political control to be able to hire people and pay them and everything. Remote is just like that, where it makes it easier for companies to hire and employ people in other countries anywhere. So that's cool. So from the case study, we learned that it was founded in 2019, but they've reached unicorn status in just over 2 years. And they're still on this rapid trajectory. And from the beginning, Elixir was their primary technology. And currently their engineering organization as a whole consists of nearly 300 people. So what's great about this write-up is it starts off with explaining things like, why did you choose Elixir? And then gets into some more interesting details like, oh, they're using a monolith. It has an Elixir backend and a React front end. They use Sasha Urich's boundary library to help enforce boundaries in the code. But one of the things I really loved about this is they talked about how when the co-founders, like why they chose Elixir in the beginning. And it was that whole idea of, I've used lots of different languages and seen lots of problems when you try to, be productive, but then also go to scale. And when Elixir came out and saw, oh, this is really nice, I can see how this can also scale. That's what they selected. And what I think is awesome about this is, like, this is a standard setup, right? There is nothing exotic about this architecture. This is exactly what they set out to do, which is create a monolith so they have developer productivity, they have ease of development and management of the whole project, but it supports scaling all the way up. And I just think that's awesome. Like that, like if you want to share a case study with a manager or someone's like, this is a great one to share. It's like, you don't have to have all this extra complexity. You can just start small and keep going.
Yeah, I love that feeling. I know it always feels like leadership always considers things like, well, if we choose Rails, we'll be fast to start, but then slow to evolve, or if we choose Java, then it'll be slow to start, but at least we can hire a bajillion developers,
Yep.
and maybe not have like the most modern like web technology kind of stuff, but everything else would be taken care of. But with Elixir, yeah, Elixir is like from start to finish, like easy to start with, and then fast, and then easier to like distribute and evolve with as well.
Yeah.
May not have every single package in the world to handle all the exotic things, but that didn't bother Remote. And I still believe that, like, even in those cases, like it would still be worth the effort to create that package and maintain it, and or leverage the community and maybe put out a bounty for someone to create something like that for you. Anyway, I totally love Remote's story here. It's pretty great.
Yeah, I just want to add, like, the effort of writing these types of case studies, it's marketing, right? You're taking time away from development to write this piece, but it's important. Like, doing this type of marketing work is important, because in the Elixir community, we could be having all these developers doing all this incredible stuff, but if people outside of our community don't know what's happening, they're going to pass by Elixir and choose something else just because they say, oh, I can see other companies are being successful in this area.
Yeah.
So it's important work to do. I'm grateful that they were able to put some effort into making some of this happen and see this type of great case study content.
All right. Well, hey, let's shift over to Elixir stuff. What's going on in like the language itself? So we came across a popular article with, by article, I mean a Reddit post. And the question was simply like, are type specs deprecated? I can see that as a, it's a common question. And I think folks have had their assumptions, but not a definite answer. Until about now. Jose Valim commented on the Reddit post. It has a lot of good information on there, a lot of good bets, I think, that we're going to see in the coming versions of Elixir. But here's the TLDR, is that yes, eventually the Elixir type spec syntax would quote unquote deprecate the dialyzer type specs. And the progress for seeing that would be seen in Elixir 1.19 and 1.20, which is going to be, halfway through this year and at the end of this year. And we've talked about the type system a lot in the news. A lot of that effort is going into like Elixir main branch or something. So we don't really get to see that. And they might just be throwing out ideas or talking about it. And they've been doing, smaller incremental improvements, like just inferring the types instead of having the developer actually specify what they intend. And so we're still at the inference, stage here. I know a couple weeks ago we talked about like how structs, might evolve over time and how you get a type system to be compatible with that. So there might be, more syntax changes coming up, not just like the dialyzer stuff, but also with structs. We don't know that part yet with certainty, but anyway, this Reddit post and comment has a lot of cool information in there. And I say deprecate in quotes because it's not really deprecating it. Like dialyzer will still be there. That's really an Erlang thing, but deprecate in the sense of that you won't need to use it if you're exclusively writing, Elixir. The syntax in Elixir would replace the need for dialyzer. So there's that. You could, if you're a madman, you could do both, I guess. Never know, But I think the soundness of the Elixir type system would just not be helpful to write both at that point.
I just think of the extra effort of having to maintain both versions of it, like specs, and when we actually start using the type declarations, having both of those and like having to keep them in sync. It's like,
yeah. well, there's. I'm recalling Jose's conference talk about it, and they're different. The syntax is incompatible. So you just really wouldn't be able to express the same things with dialyzer. And this type system is, as far as I understand, this type system is in Elixir and not in Erlang. So it's not like it can be. I'm sure aspects of it might be backported somehow. Maybe just details here and there, but not the overall syntax. Yeah. But that would be kind of interesting, wouldn't it? I'm sure they've done all that research and ruled it out. All right. Hey, next up, not about type specs, but just a quick update. The Ash installer, the install scripts that they just announced like a couple weeks ago, gains Oben support. And we talked about it a week or two ago. Like I said, the installer script allows you to click some buttons and it will give you a one-liner to install or generate a new Ash project or add to an existing project. And now Oben is one of those flags that you can just throw in, which is pretty fantastic. So love seeing Igniter support here. That's really the crux of this, but then Ash is just taking advantage of that with its installer script, which is pretty great. So yeah, Igniter's really blown up. I'm loving it.
Yeah, that's exciting. All right, stepping outside of Elixir for a minute, but into Tailwind, because that's something that touches a lot of us in our projects. So Tailwind 4.0 was released. So this is a big update. We've included a link to their upgrade guide, and the upgrade guide has a lot of notes about all the different types of changes. It also includes a JavaScript tool that is supposed to apply those changes, but it lists like, different types of projects like Vite and things like that. So I don't know how well it will work or if at all with Heeks templates and things like that. So we might have to still go through some of the manual steps of moving from this class name type to a different one, things like that. But yes, this is a welcome change because there's a lot of benefits, right? It's super fast, like over 100 times faster for incremental build changes and things like that. A lot of performance improvements. But, David, what are some of the things that you saw? Because I saw you originally were sharing this on social media that you were excited about it.
Tailwind is about CSS. Mm-hmm. And so if you have like a lot of JavaScript config stuff in front of it, it's just, well, you have to, it's really about JavaScript developers. I think it's positioned for them, rightly so, I reckon. But one of the things that they're shifting over to 4.0 is configuring your theme more in CSS which is great for designers. I think that's home for designers. I think, and away from the JavaScript config thing, which is I think a cool improvement. It's not for the sake of change, like you said. It's the whole engine inside of it has been rewritten. To this is a meme at this point, but it's been rewritten in Rust. So that's one of the reasons why it's a lot faster. Anyway, and so I think just co-locating the things that make more sense together makes a lot of sense. So you configure themes and colors now in your CSS file with CSS variables versus setting up all of your stuff in JavaScript with objects and functions and things. So that was one thing that's pretty cool. Some other syntax differences is like, I think Tailwind 3 introduced the ability to put in like arbitrary values. So for example, if you're trying to add padding to the top and bottom, that class utility is called py, right? Y for the y-axis and p for padding. So padding on the y-axis dash some number. And there was a set amount of numbers, and you can configure that in your JavaScript if you wanted to, but by default, there's a set amount. But if you wanted something strange, like an in-between kind of value, you could put in square brackets. So py dash square brackets and whatever you wanted in there, and it would just kind of be forwarded on to CSS. Well, you don't have to do that anymore, the square brackets, and that is, with Tailwind. So it becomes a little bit more, the syntax becomes a little bit more, makes sense to me. It's like I often try to put in some padding and I start, messing with the numbers, just like incrementing here and there. And I get to some number that's just not defined, and then I get no padding. Right. And so I have to go look back at the docs like, what's the stepping of these numbers, and try to, just remember it. If you remove that whole like flow, and now I can just plug in whatever number I want in there and it just works, that's going to be cool. And then there was also like a strange mixture of, with Tailwind 3, in your CSS, you could put in like non-CSS kind of like things in there. And that's for what it's worth, it's still kind of in there, but it's just a little bit more aligned with CSS now. But before you would put in like JavaScript variable paths, like key paths in there in your CSS to access some variable in your configuration. But now you in your CSS it's kind of the same, but you refer to a CSS variable, which just makes more sense to me, right? So for example, one example is if I wanted to create a class and I wanted to use one of my configurations in the Tailwind config JavaScript file, I can put in like background color, and then old way would be theme, which is not a real CSS thing, but theme, parentheses, colors.red.500. So it's just like, get your JavaScript out of my CSS, basically, right? So now it's background color, var, open parens, -- color - red - 500, because that's a real that's like 2-spec CSS variable reference there. Which is nice. I used to, and I guess I still do. I used to love Tailwind because it still teaches you CSS through all of its, utilities. But there was just a lot of these weird moments like this that would just be very Tailwind and not CSS. And now they're getting back to like proper CSS here, which I think is just aesthetically, syntactically, good. It's a better direction, I think. Because they may have been in danger due to all the popularity of Tailwind. They may have been in danger of creating this and by substandard, I mean like a big part of the standard that's not official. Yes. Like jQuery was back in the day. Like JavaScript had to basically adopt jQuery kind of syntax because of its just sheer popularity. And there wasn't, the choice really couldn't be made at that point. Anyway, I digress a little bit there. So those are maybe some small examples, but it's a lot of stuff like that Tailwind 4.0 just I think gets more right. So thankfully, there is that upgrade like code mod, but I haven't run through it myself, and I'm doubtful that it will fix all my Heeks templates.
I would be surprised if it did. But one of the things they do recommend just before running their tool, which I think is just a good idea anyway, is like create a new branch that's clean for doing all these changes so you can isolate it, experiment with it, have other people look at it. Also, we saw that that the Phoenix project has a work in progress PR to support Tailwind 4. So that's also interesting, because we do have that Elixir side code that makes it easy to pull in the Tailwind parts. We'll be needing to have some updates there, possibly, to be able to take advantage of some of these new features. I don't know.
I think that's mostly with the generators. It's not really about the Phoenix library itself. Yeah.
Well, you do use that tool to help download the version of Tailwind that is executed to do the builds locally too. It's
that's right.
Part of the ES build kind of thing.
One of the other changes too is like Phoenix has its own variants for live view. So where you define those variants is now in CSS, not in the JavaScript config file. One of the other things that we do in Phoenix generators is hero icons, which is related to Tailwind. Right, it's the same folks. And so we have generated a bunch of like functions to scan for these certain classes and create these certain like classes that will just read the SVGs of the hero icons and put them in there, for you. So that's got to be adjusted somehow. Like, where do you put that script now? There's adjustments to be made. But you're right. There is that other library that is that wraps around the Tailwind CLI. So I'm kind of curious I don't know off the top of my head. I'm kind of curious of what changes, if any, need to happen there, because the wrapper around it was pretty simple. It was like, watch these files and spit them out over here.
Yep.
And it was just wrapping the CLI, so it's in your control on when you upgrade to 4.0, for example. But yeah, if the watching stuff changes, then yeah, maybe there's more to update.
What I think is interesting is we talk about, we're talking about this change, and it is an external library that the Phoenix and Elixir community has taken a lot of interest in. Not everyone's using it, right? But a lot of people are. But it's one of those things where you talk about, okay, well, this is kind of one of those moments of churn where something is changing and it has this ripple. And I think, we hit that occasionally in the Elixir and Phoenix community, right? Occasionally we have that type of churn. I'm just so glad we're not in the JavaScript community, because that kind of churn is like daily. It's like, and weekly. It's like, oh my gosh.
I'm sure they could say a little bit about us as well. With the early adoption of Phoenix Live View and Heeks and all that stuff, there was a good amount of churn in there too.
It's true. It's true.
But yeah, I hear what you're saying. Well, hey, related to the Tailwind release, Zach Daniel of Ash fame shared how this is going to enable them as in the Igniter folks, to have a utility in Igniter to add a source to the user's Tailwind config. Right, so if they detected that config file exists, then you'd have to do it kind of manually. But if they detect the CSS config file, then they can just look for a matching import line, and if not, add it to the file. So sounds like some of the changes in V4 is actually good news for code injectors like Igniter. So I don't know. We'll see how I think that's just a first impression from Zach, but we'll see what comes of it.
And next up, the Elixir LangChain library reached version 0.3.0. So this is the library I work on, and it was previously in an extended RC phase. So I was grateful to be able to, okay, let's get it all cleaned up and stamped and officially released. So that's happened. So as a reminder, this is an Elixir library that makes it easy for an Elixir application to interact with an LLM. It supports OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, Llama, and more, some through Bumblebee as well. Really, I think the biggest benefit and the main reason I created the library was I saw what cool things people were doing in other communities, be it Python or JavaScript, and with AI. And I wanted the Elixir community to not get left behind in something like that. And this was just like the cool proof of concept apps that they were creating, like, oh, look what I could do with this LLM. I want that for myself, and I want the Elixir community to have that. So what this library does is it really abstracts away all the unique, weird differences between these different AI services. And as they change, which they continually do, it helps shield your application from all that nuance. So you kind of think of it like, like an ecto adapter, right? You've got MySQL, Postgres, SQLite. They've all got their own flavor of how to do something. Like that's what it's trying to do, is just make it so I can not have my code change significantly when I want to change to a different large language model. So this latest release had some great things in it, like OpenAI's O1 support, Bumblebee, Llama 3.x function calling is supported. So there's a newer version of instruction-based llama models. This is from Meta, that were actually implementing function calling. But like, this is just like a little behind the curtain kind of thing, right? That function calling was trained and done using a Python function syntax, right? So unless you want to have that in your code in your application, having to do that type of text, it's like, no, shield me from that. Let me have protect me. Yes. So another feature is Anthropic token caching. And another one that is really important when you're talking about using AI in production is built-in fallbacks to another preferred LLM. So think like, I want to use Anthropic because Claude does the best job with what I'm trying to do for this type of task. But then what happens is Anthropic is down. Or they're like, we're overloaded, come back later. So what you can do is you can just have it automatically fall back to AWS Bedrock, which also hosts Anthropic Claude. So the idea is my prompts don't have to change at all, because if I go from OpenAI to Anthropic, I might need to structure my prompts differently to get the same performance, like the same types of results, right? If I stay with the same model, but hosted somewhere else, I don't have that problem. So the automatic fallback lets you do that. Another way to do that is OpenAI. You say you're going to ChatGPT. Well, OpenAI has this partnership with Azure, Microsoft. So you can actually use an Azure OpenAI hosted model too. So you can swap between and go to the same model, different places to help your app not have to worry about outages from AI services. So things like that. So yes, I'm just proud to say version 0.3.0 was released. So check it out if you want to play with AI and haven't touched it yet.
That sounds like a lot of work, man. Props to you. But also, man, the state of LLMs and using these services just seems like such a dumpster fire right now.
It is a mess just because it keeps changing so fast. So here's another interesting thing, right? OpenAI, the O1 models, these are their new reasoning models. They're doing a lot more. People were manually doing this before, where they'd say, I want to run multiple passes on this data, running with different sets of instructions to refine a result so I can get a better quality result. So OpenAI is just building that into the model that you're talking to. So it's doing this whole chain of thought, this whole thinking through things. Now it goes back and looks at itself again and say, did I miss anything? Is anything wrong? It's doing all of that, which is slower and costs more money because it's using more tokens. But with that change, they said, I think they set up the standard, like that the first message in your conversation is the system message, right? They said, we're gonna rename that to developer. So now it has to be a developer message. And but we won't automatically update that for you when you make a call through the API. We'll give you an error. But then if you call like 4.0 and you say developer message, no, that's an error there. It has to be system. So, the library protects all that.
That's good. Yeah. Do they have a charge for these errors?
I don't think so.
Okay, good.
One thing I just want to mention, I guess, is a lot of the stuff that's come out in the library, especially things like getting support with AWS Bedrock and the Bumblebee Llama function call support. That's all happening from contributions from the community.
Oh, that's nice.
I can't do all of that, right? That's just, it's too much. It's really appreciated, but it's becoming something that a lot of different people are finding value in and using it in these different areas and these different models that I've never seen. It's like, I want to have support for the 5.4, PHI 4 model. It's like, okay, what's that? Sounds good. You made the changes. Nice.
Man. Yeah, not related to your change, but just you mentioning OpenAI 01, they just released that. But all the steam, came out, the wind out of their sails because DeepSeek also came out and just obliterated all of the benchmarks of these big tech, models, including OpenAI 01. So I know you don't have DeepSeek in here, and I'm not even sure what services provide DeepSeek. That's one of those open source models, and I'm not sure if there's a service that backs it. I'm sure there is. I just don't know. Been reading a lot more about these kinds of things, and DeepSeek seems to have a lot of activity right now. And I don't know. I know this isn't an investors podcast, but there's a couple of stocks that are taking a beating right now because it turns out DeepSeek is massively better and cheaper. And so if that's true, then all these big tech companies are just trying to hold these stock prices hostage, and investors are catching wind of it, and they're like, well.
Yeah, DeepSeek's an interesting one, just because if I understand it right, it's Chinese, right?
Right.
And so there may be some concern about that because political reasons, we're not always on the best.
But open source too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is I just went to the DeepSeek.com and clicked on their API platform, and at this moment, it comes up with the 503 currently under maintenance.
Of course it does, because these things are still a dumpster fire.
It's just it's all moving really fast.
Yeah. Man. Oh, I still don't know how to test these things. How do you test these things? Like there's nothing that's like consistent here, like this is a test it in prod, live in prod only. You can't have tests on this. Like there's no reliability on here. I still have a big gap of how to safely implement a consistent thing here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, coming up next is a quick little celebration call out to the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation. Earlier this month of January, was their 6th anniversary. It's hard to remember time in the Elixir land without the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation, but that happened for a long time. There was no foundation to support, all of the efforts of the community. So 6 years ago, about this time 6 years ago, the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation was founded and has set up several working groups, all advancing, the coordination and proliferation of, Erlang and Elixir and all the other languages of the ecosystem, out there into the world. So happy birthday, EEF. We're happy you're here. Well, here's to another 6 years.
Yep, that's awesome. All right, and next up, Chris McCord has been teasing some really interesting things that he's working on, but nothing is officially released yet. So it's been a while since we've talked about any like big teases. Jose was teasing for a long time, when NX was coming out and all that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Chris is now teasing something, and he says, I'm working on a fly.io thing, an AI code generator with full IDE and terminal, port forwards your spawned servers, agent with root access. Yes, really. And he includes a video showing this like web-based AI integrated editor with the ability to generate, and it's actually generating and showing the live view on the side of generating a tic-tac-toe Phoenix live view app. And he's just writing the entire app through prompts, and he's not writing any of the code himself manually. He's having a lot of fun with it. There's nothing yet to say, oh, try this out yourself. Too early for that. But I'm very interested to see what he comes up with, and we will be sure to share that when we have something more to say.
Yeah. Maybe more importantly is what will his mascot be for this new thing he's creating? All right. Hey, last up, rounding out the day of news, we got ElixirConf EU tickets. They have finally gone on sale, and you can find them at ElixirConf.eu. If you're not sure where that is and when that is, I got the info for that too. It's in Kraków, Poland, and it's also virtual. So if you can't make it out there physically, virtual is still good. It is happening this year, May 15th through the 16th. So it's just a 2-day conference. A list of keynotes and speakers is up, along with the training that's being offered as well. So if you've been wondering about it, now's the time to go check it out and go get you some tickets. It's in Kraków, Poland again. That's on May 15th through the 16th. So that should be some good summer days over there.
Yeah. And as of this recording, it's their early bird special. I think it was like €450. But I don't know how long that early bird special is available. So go check that out if you're interested. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us next time on Thinking Elixir.